I need the money tomorrow, my father ordered me, handing me my sister's debt of $950,000. And no delays, he added. I smiled and said okay. 4 hours later, I was at the airport. When he came to my house for the money, he found only a closed door and a box which he opened and started screaming that okay hung in the air long after they left, tasting like ash in my mouth. My father thought he'd won. Maria looked relieved. They saw compliance. They didn't see the calculation. You have to understand, the Hayes Gallery wasn't just a business. It was my father's monument to himself, built on my mother's legacy. And in that monument, there were two roles. My sister Maria was the golden child. She was the creative, the public face, the one who charmed collectors and artists. She was the star. I was the accountant, the logistics manager, the silent brain in the back office, making sure the star actually had a stage to stand on. I remember the night of the spring exhibition 2 years ago. Maria was dazzling in a silver dress, laughing as champagne corks popped, accepting congratulations for the vision of the show. She was brilliant. Everyone said so. No one saw me in the back office at 11 p.m., transferring $20,000 from my personal savings account to cover the catering bill she'd forgotten to approve, the one that was due before midnight or the company would default. I remember her research trip to Paris last year. She came back with sketches and inspiration. She didn't mention the frantic 3 a.m. call I got from a gallery in the Marais district. Maria had accidentally damaged a mid-century sculpture, and the insurance she was supposed to secure, she'd never filed the paperwork. That mistake cost me $45,000. My money, not the gallery's. Just fix it, Abby, she'd whispered over the phone. You're so good at fixing things. And I did. I always did. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who managed the shipping manifests, balanced the fraudulent books Connor, her artist husband, kept accidentally messing up, and covered the losses from Maria's failed auction bids. My work was like invisible ink. It held the entire story together, but it was designed to vanish the moment the spotlight hit Maria. I was the fixer, the ghost in the machine, the chief financial officer of their extravagant, careless lives. And I was so tired of it. For years, I kept asking myself why. Why did I keep doing it? Why did I accept a role I never applied for? It's a concept psychologists call golden child divided by black sheep dynamics. In some families, to maintain stability, children are assigned roles. Maria was the golden child, the brilliant, creative, fragile one who needed to be protected and celebrated. I was the black sheep. Or maybe the responsible child. The one who was strong, capable, and invisible. The one who could handle the pressure so the golden child didn't have to. I was trapped in a prison that didn't have bars. It's the invisible chain of the survivor. You get so used to navigating the dysfunction, so used to being the fixer, that you start to believe that fixing their problems is your only value. You believe it's the only way to earn their love. And you keep paying. You keep fixing. You keep sacrificing. Not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to believe that their survival depends on your sacrifice. So I stood there in my office, the scent of their panic filling the air. Mark. Maria. It's not just debt, Abby, Mark said, his voice dropping to that low, urgent tone he used when he was about to move millions. It's the centerpiece. I froze. The centerpiece. He meant the Albers painting. A massive museum-quality piece we were holding on consignment. It wasn't ours to sell, it was our reputation. Connor. He thought he could leverage it. Maria whispered, her tears finally looking genuine. He thought he could use it as collateral for an investment. And he lost it. The owner found out. He's going to sue. He's going to the press. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a mistake. This was theft. This was fraud. This was the end of the Hayes Gallery. 70 years of reputation gone because my sister married an idiot and my father enabled them both. He's giving us 24 hours, Mark said, his voice shaking. 24 hours to come up with $950,000 or he ruins us. He looked at me, his eyes hard. He ruins me. He didn't mean the money. He meant the name, the legacy. You have to fix this, Abigail, he said. It wasn't a request. Your investments, your private portfolio. Liquidate them. And there it was. It wasn't enough that I was their accountant, their logistician, their silent fixer. It wasn't enough that I'd poured my own money into their messes for a decade. Now, they weren't just asking for my savings, they were asking for my future. They were asking me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. They were demanding I sacrifice everything I had built for myself to cover up their crime. To save their reputation. I looked at Maria, who was now openly sobbing into her hands. I looked at Mark, his jaw set, entitled, expecting it. This was the breaking point. This was the moment the invisible chains finally became visible. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The panic disappeared. The anger dissolved into something cold and clear. Okay, I said. My okay was a contract, not with them but with myself. I walked out of the office. Maria was still crying. Mark was already on his phone, probably arranging the wire transfer from me. Neither of them noticed the look in my eyes. I went home to my apartment, the one I paid for in a building they didn't know the address of, and I began to work. They thought I was just a good accountant. They forgot I was a brilliant strategist. You can't spend your life managing the chaos of entitled people without learning how to build a fortress. My plan had been in place for months, a break glass in case of emergency strategy I'd hoped I'd never have to use. The emergency was here. At 5 p.m., I called my lawyer. Elizabeth, I said, it's time. Execute the transfers. She knew exactly what that meant. For the past 3 years, every time I'd bailed Maria out, every time I'd covered one of Mark's miscalculations, I hadn't just given them money. I'd had them sign paperwork which they never read, transferring ownership of gallery assets to my private holding company. I wasn't just their fixer, I was their primary creditor. And the collateral I held was the gallery's entire core inventory. All those unsellable modern pieces in the vault, they weren't unsellable. They were just mine. Then I packed the box. I didn't just pack receipts. I packed their entire history of deceit. I called it the ledger. Inside, I placed the real accounting books, the ones showing my personal funds covering payroll for 6 of the last 12 months. The ones showing my $45,000 payment for the damaged sculpture in Paris. I placed the official deeds of ownership for the 17 most valuable paintings in their vault, all legally and quietly transferred to my name over the last 3 years. These documents proved the Hayes Gallery was a hollow shell, and I was the one holding its soul. And then I added the final piece. The twist. I wrote a personal check for $100,000. I smiled as I signed it. It was the exact amount down to the dollar that my father had borrowed from my mother's trust fund 20 years ago to start the gallery in the first place. A debt he never repaid. I placed it right on top of the other documents. The original sin. The first debt. I sealed the box. At 8 p.m., I booked a one-way flight to Santa Fe, leaving in 4 hours. I packed one suitcase, left my apartment key on the counter, and drove to the gallery one last time. It was dark. I placed the ledger on the cold stone step right by the front door where Mark would be sure to find it when he came to collect a check I was never going to write. Then I drove to O'Hare and didn't look back. I landed in Santa Fe as the sun was rising, painting the desert sky in shades of pink and orange. It felt like another planet. The air was clean, crisp, and quiet. There was no history here, no ghosts. I found a small adobe rental with a patio, bought a bag of local coffee, and sat outside as the city woke up. I was 2,000 miles away. I was finally completely alone. At exactly 12:01 p.m. Chicago time, my phone rang. It was Mark. I let it ring twice, took a sip of coffee, and answered. "Where is the money, Abigail?" His voice wasn't a command anymore. It was a raw, panicked shout. "The owner is here. The bank is waiting. Where is the money?" "Good afternoon, Dad," I said, my voice as calm as the desert air. "Don't," he sputtered. "Don't you good afternoon me? The deal was noon. You gave me your word." "I did," I said. But I changed my mind. "Did you check the front porch of the gallery?" What are you talking about?" "There's a box," I said. "I left it for you. I think you should open it." I hung up. I didn't have to be there to see it. I could picture it perfectly. I pictured him storming out of the gallery, his face red, confused. I pictured him seeing the simple cardboard box. I pictured him ripping it open, expecting, I don't know what. A confession? An apology? What he found was the truth. I gave him about 10 minutes. 10 minutes to let the reality sink in. I knew the first thing he'd see was the check. The one for $100,000. He'd be confused. Then he'd see the note attached. Reimbursement for the initial loan from Mom's trust. We're even. Then I knew he'd tear into the rest. I pictured his hands, the ones that had patted my shoulder just days before shaking, as he flipped through the real ledgers, page after page of my money covering their extravagance. Payroll shipping Maria's research trips. I pictured his face going pale as he realized it wasn't just about my money. He'd see the deeds. The legal ironclad proofs of ownership. The 17 most valuable pieces in his vault. The Albers, the Frankenthaler, the Twombly. He'd realize he couldn't sell them to cover the debt. He couldn't leverage them. He couldn't do anything. Because they weren't his. They were mine. He'd see that the 70-year legacy of the Hayes Gallery was a hollow shell, an empty room, and I was the one who owned the walls. My phone rang again. This time it was Maria. I answered. It wasn't a voice. It was a shriek. A raw animal sound of pure terror. Abby? Abby? What did you do? The owner is threatening to call the police. Dad won't move. He's just staring at these papers. What did you do? I did what you asked me to do, Maria, I said. What we asked you to help us. No, I said, and my voice was so cold it surprised even me. You asked me to fix it, and I did. I fixed the part that was broken. Me. But the money, the $950,000, what are we going to do? She sobbed. I took another sip of my coffee. The Santa Fe sun was warm on my face. I guess you'll have to sell your penthouse, I said. And then I hung up. I blocked their numbers after that. I needed silence. Weeks passed. The chaos in Chicago reached me only as distant echoes. I heard through my lawyer that the gallery's assets were seized. The lawsuit from the painting's owner went through, and since the gallery was now just a bankrupt shell, they went after my father personally. Maria did sell her penthouse, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. I spent my time walking in the desert, breathing air that didn't feel heavy with obligation. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since before my mother passed. I was sitting on my small patio watching the sunset paint the mountains purple when an unknown number called. I almost didn't answer, but a quiet curiosity made me pick up. Abby? It was my father's voice, but not his voice. The command was gone. The anger was gone. It was just empty. Hi, Dad. There was a long pause filled with the sound of his breathing. I'm calling from a payphone. They took my cards. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. They took the house. I stayed silent. You know, he said, his voice quiet when I opened that box. After I got past the anger, I saw the check. The $100,000. He paused again. I'd forgotten I even took that from her. From your mother. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself I was building something for all of us. But you weren't, I said, not as an accusation, just as a fact. No, he whispered. I was building it for me. I was just using her money to do it. And then I used yours. He let out a long, shaky breath. The gallery, the name. It was all built on a lie, wasn't it? And you were the only one who had to pay the interest. This was it. The moment I'd waited my entire life for. Not the yelling, not the begging, but this. The truth. I'm sorry, Abigail, he said, and his voice finally cracked. I'm so sorry. I was the problem. Not you. I was always the problem. I closed my eyes. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a single bright streak of orange. I know, Dad, I said. Me too. We hung up. And I sat there in the dark, letting the tears I didn't know I was holding finally fall. People talk about family as if it's an unbreakable bond. They talk about blood being thicker than water. But they never talk about what happens when the blood is toxic. They don't talk about the guilt that comes with surviving the agonizing choice to cut off a part of yourself to save the rest. I had to let go of the idea of the family I wanted to face the reality of the family I had. and I had to make a choice. Not to be their savior, not to be their accountant, not even to be their enemy, just to be separate. To find out who I was when I wasn't fixing their mistakes. It wasn't an act of hate. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation. I'm still here in Santa Fe. My life is quiet now. I opened a small consultancy, a one-woman shop helping local artists here navigate the business side of the art world. How to price their work, how to manage their inventory, how to protect themselves. I'm not building an empire, I'm just helping people build their futures. Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture. Maria, in a simple barista uniform, holding up a latte with terrible foam art. The caption just said, "My first one, it's ugly, but I made it myself." I smiled, and for the first time I texted back. It's a start. What do you think of Abigail's final choice? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe because I read every single one.